We are Thanh Hương and Phạm Hương from Group 18. Today, we are allowed to present a video about Renaissance in art, architecture, literature, and how did humanism underlie this trend. What is a direct threat to the role of the church? Hope you guys enjoy it. So now, let's get started. Firstly, we are going to show you about a brief introduction about the Renaissance. The Renaissance refers to the era in Europe from the 14th century to the 16th century, in which a new style in painting, sculpture, and architecture developed after the Gothic. Although a religious view of the world continued to play an important role in the life of Europeans, a growing awareness of the natural world, the individual and collective humanity's worldly existence characterized the Renaissance period. Derived from the French word Renaissance and the Italian word Rinascita, both meaning rebirth. The Renaissance was a period when scholars and artists began to investigate what they believed to be a revival of the classical learning, literature, and art. Secondly, about Renaissance humanism. Renaissance humanism is the spirit of learning that developed at the end of the Middle Ages with the revival of the classical letters and a renewed confidence in the ability of human beings to determine for themselves truth and falsehood. In general, humanism did not begin to emerge during the Renaissance art, but it did occur again and again in earlier civilizations, and often occurred when humans began to fall, loosen the aspect of morality, reason, and divinity, but seek liberation through other ways. This is due to not only the individual, but to the whole society. Even the church is also politically and economically secularized. And the next, humanism underlies Renaissance in art. During the Renaissance era, humanism became a central motive for painters, sculptors, and artists alike. In the artist period, such as the medieval era, the content of most work was religious-based. In the High Renaissance, we start to slowly move away from this. Religious scenes or characters are still being depicted, but in a different light. Perhaps the messages conveyed by art in the High Renaissance are aimed towards more human-based ideals, rather than religious themes. The beauty in human form and humanity itself were discovered and, for the most part, replaced the beauty of divinity and holiness. The Renaissance marked a developing curiosity and keen interest in the individual. Unlike representations of human figures in the medieval era, which were usually cold and a bit lifeless, portrayal of human beings in Renaissance art more often than not appear nude and full, embracing humanism. Artists focus more on composition than content and subject matter. Another influence of humanism on art of the Renaissance is the passing of representing halos over the holy figures. This also showed the receding religious values during the time. Leonardo da Vinci last supper even made Christ and his disciples more of the earth and human life in withdrawing their house. Humanism underlies Renaissance in architecture. The revolutionary achievement in the Florentine painters in the 15th century were marked by equally stunning advances in sculpture and architecture. The sculptors, Donatello, spent time in Rome studying and copying the statues of the Greeks and Romans. Among his numerous works was a statue of Saint George, a realistic, freestanding figure. The Medici, the wealthy ruling family in Florence, hired Brunelleschi to design the church of Saint Lorenzo. The classical columns and rounded arches that Brunelleschi used in the church design create an environment that does not overwhelm the worshipper, as Gothic cathedral might. Instead, the church provides a comfort as a space created to fit human, and not divine, needs. Like painters and sculptors, Renaissance architects sought to reflect a human-centered world. By the end of the 15th century, Italian painters, sculptors, and architects had created a new artistic world. Many artists had mastered the new technique for realistically portraying the world around them and were now ready to move into the new form of creative expression. Humanism underlies Renaissance in literature. The humanist emphasis on classical Latin led to its widespread use in the writing of the scholars, lawyers, and theologians. However, some writers were in the vernacular, the language spoken in their own region, such as Italian, French, or German. In the 14th century, the literary works of the Italian author Dante and the English author Geoffrey Chaucer helped make the vernacular literature more popular. Dante's masterpiece in the Italian vernacular is a Divine Comedy. It is a story of the soul journey to salvation. The lengthy poem is divided into three major sections: Hell, Purgatory, and Heaven or Paradise. Dante is on an imaginary journey through these three regions until he reaches paradise, where he beholds God or the love that moves the sun and the other stars. Chaucer used the English vernacular in his famous work, The Canterbury Tales. His beauty of expression and clear, forceful language were important in making his dialect and chief ancestor of the modern English language. Another writer who used the vernacular was Christine Despizan, the French woman who is best known for her work written in defense of women. In the book of the City of Ladies, written in 1404, she denounced the many male writers who argued that women, by their very nature, are unable to learn and are easily swayed. Finally, whether these traits threat to the role of the church or not, the city of Rome, the papacy, and the papal state were all affected by the Renaissance. On the other hand, it was a time of great artistic patronage and architectural magnificence, when the church pardoned and even sponsored such artists as Michelangelo, Fra Angelo, Donatello, and Da Vinci. Moreover, wealthy Italian families often secured episcopal offices, including the papacy, for their own members, some of whom were known for immorality. In the revival of the Neoplatonism and other ancient philosophies, Renaissance humanists did not reject Christianity. Quite to the contrary, many of Renaissance greatest works were devoted to it, and the church patronized work of Renaissance art. The new ideal of humanists, although more secular in some aspects, developed against a Christian backdrop, especially in the Northern Renaissance. In turn, the Renaissance had a profound effect on contemporary theology, particularly in the way people perceived the relationship between man and God. In addition to being the head of the church, the Pope became one of Italy's more important secular rulers, and pontiffs such as Julius II often waged campaigns to protect and expand their temporal domains. Furthermore, the popes in a spirit defied competition with other Italian lords, spent lavishly both on private luxury and public works, repairing and building churches, bridges, and magnificent system on aqueducts in Rome that still function today. From 1505 to 1626, St. Peter Basilica, perhaps the most recognized Christian church, was built on the site of the old Constantine Basilica in Rome. This was time of the increased contact with Greek culture, opening a new avenues of learning, especially in the field of philosophy, poetry, classics, rhetoric, and political science, fostering a spirit of human all of which would influence the church. Now, this is the end of our presentation. Thank you guys for listening.